going to get started right now. We know that there are others who are joining us. Ms. Falacaro is going to be our first presenter. We have two presentations today. First of all, let me just give some background as to where we're at right now before we get in there. We're going to have other people joining us. First of all, thank you everyone for your participation so far in the budget advisory team. This will be, I'm sure, a full table by the time we're done at 6:45, so people will be filtering in as they can. We just had shared decision making going on, but again, with the presentations, in all fairness to time, I want to start right away. The two community forums that we had, I think have gone very well. I think people have had a chance to definitely express their desires. I was surprised we didn't have more people express their ideas on Saturday. You know, hopefully people still will. We still left the option open if people still have more suggestions to either leave them with the superintendent and leave the name, or leave them with the superintendent anonymously. Either way, it does not matter. Not everyone may feel comfortable coming up to a podium and talking about that. What we're looking at here, right now, we looked through the list of items in closing the budget gap. We were pretty close there if everything happened. We knew not everything was going to be able to happen on there. The two things that we still had on the docket to talk about and really delve into, athletics and transportation. And depending on where we go with that, it will help us to determine cost savings for the budget for next year and closing the gap. So looking at that, just outlining where we're at right now in terms of budget advisory meetings. We've got obviously the meeting today. The next scheduled meeting is scheduled for April 8th. And then after that, we have from there, the budget would need to be adopted no later than April 25th. So if we don't adopt on April 8th, my guess is it probably is going to be pushed out past that, because we had initially said it either April 8th or April 22nd, with the need of a possible extra budget advisory meeting on the 22nd if that's the case. If we do that, and we're going to be talking more tonight at the board meeting about that, I just want to give the budget advisory team committee a heads up. If we start looking at the 8th as our next meeting, that means the full budget will come before here. The board will look at it after that. Will the board be ready to vote then without any changes? Maybe, maybe not. If that's the case, there may be some final tweaks that need to happen. Come the 22nd, or if we have another meeting before that, we have to adopt by the 22nd. So we have our work definitely cut out for us. So after we hear tonight's and we get some sense as to the numbers, and we get a sense of where to go, that'll help close the rest of the gap. It should help close the rest of the gap. And from there, then we can make the presentation on the 8th to say, here's what we're looking at dollar-wise. Does that make sense? Yes.
So Tom, so I'm looking at the last schedule that we received, and it says that April 8th is the board adoption of the budget. So is there a meeting after our BAT meeting on that night?
We'll talk about that at the board meeting tonight,
Okay.
but the board would have to have a specially called meeting on April 8th
Okay.
after the BAT meeting.
So there's definitely a BAT meeting, we just don't know.
There's definitely a BAT meeting, that is correct. So, again, just looking at the schedule of where the board adoption would take place, we'll talk about that later on.
Do you want me to jump in?
Feel free.
So the BAT meeting is already scheduled. I assume it's at 5:45 on April 8th?
Correct.
All right. The recommendation that will be made at the board meeting tonight is to have a special board meeting on April 8th, directly following the BAT. Last year, we had the opportunity to have a board meeting after the first week in April, but before the third week in April. That week this year is in the middle of spring break. So if the board does not adopt the budget at the April 8th meeting, which will be recommended that we have a meeting, there's always an option to carry a special board meeting during spring break, April 15th, but it's really a bad time to try to corral a board meeting together. Waiting until April 22nd would basically be stating that most of our work would be done closer to the 8th, knowing we're going into a vacation period and the board is getting together on the 22nd without changes that would be really cumbersome. So our timeline is pretty close.
It is close.
Okay.
So if we either went the 15th or 22nd, whatever we look at on the 8th would be the bulk of changes coming from that, and then either the 15th or 22nd pretty much being the final. If that makes sense. Okay.
Did they
Yes.
close, did you guys close the rest of the gap? You're like 850,000?
We were down to about 36,000 with all the proposed changes. We knew some of the proposed changes would not happen. That's why we said we still needed to hear from athletics and transportation of where we thought that would be for the coming year. And that would give us a better sense of where we're going to be. Okay, so with that as a backdrop, and we can talk more about the dates for the board meeting at the board meeting?
Yes, please.
Okay, let's get right to Marissa.
Okay, if anybody needs a copy of the...
She printed 5 additional as a nice
and a couple
mixture
additional that
between.
can go around.
Marissa, do you mind if I jump in just before you
Nope.
start while you're passing things out? I don't know if all of you are aware, Marissa is a part-time AD and a part-time teacher. Marissa would have to go to school in order to get her admin degree in order to be a full-time administrator. We have had administrators who are TOSAs, it's what we call them, teachers on special assignment, who are full-time, but they have to be instructional support. An athletic director is more management, more administrative, and therefore you cannot have a teacher as a full-time AD. Having said that, it's important to note that because Marissa is a TOSA, she is part of the teacher's contract. So what we don't do is to put her in the middle. So I would not ask Marissa, and I ask that you not ask Marissa, which teams she would ask to cut, because she won't answer you, because I've told her she can't answer you, because she can't do that within her own group. So that would be left to the board and to me or to Tom to make those decisions. So but I ask that you honor the fact that she is coming to you in a very quasi place as a TOSA.
Okay, thank you. I was asked to keep this kind of short, so I didn't highlight all the values of athletics, but I gave you a couple main points. Interscholastic athletics provides students with opportunities to develop loyalty, school spirit, to practice teamwork, hard work, discipline, sacrifice, leadership, sportsmanship, and to gain lifetime appreciation of the arts, sports, and a healthy lifestyle. Athletics provide a great educational experience because they can teach important values for dealing with circumstances of life. The values taught through interscholastic athletics include teamwork, sportsmanship, citizenship, respect for self and others, caring, dedication, commitment, trustworthiness, loyalty, responsibility, integrity, fairness, and doing one's best regardless of the outcome. The values are often called intrinsic because they may not be included in the lesson plans coaches prepare, but they are very much a part of what a successful coach teaches. In its 8th straight year, Eden is offering 54 teams, 14 are modified, 14 are JV, and 26 are varsity. Last year, 24 of our 26, it should be, varsity teams earned Scholar Athlete Awards. In 2012-2013 school year, 419 athletes grades 7 through 12 out of 799 participated in one or more sports. That's 52.4%. And yes, these are actual students that I only counted once. I know there's been a lot of talk of, well, you're double counting and everything. These are students that were counted one time. So for 2012-2013, it was 52.4% participated in athletics. In 2013-2014 school year, 407 athletes, grades 7 through 12, out of 754 participated in one or more fall or winter sports. And out of that 754, that's a percentage of 53.9. This number will be higher by the year's end as we just started spring sports, and I don't have those rosters on. So this is showing that even with the declining population, by the time we add in those spring sports, we are expecting to have a higher percentage than last year. Last year, 18 of our athletes went on to play at the collegiate level. This year, we have 13 athletes already committed to play in college next year. The upcoming school year, I have a couple of the current budget that is what, if we made no cuts, nothing to them, we ran the same programs that we currently are, this is what the budget would look like. I don't have enough for everybody though, if you want to share.
Do you need me to make more copies?
No, I didn't. I didn't put it in there. The other cuts are in there, the other cuts.
I'll make additional copies.
Okay.
Are we okay? We're all right.
We'll be all right.
For sure. So if this was to stay with the current teams that we have, which I put up there before, which is the 54 teams, you'll see when you get to the last page that the proposed budget is $337,000, roughly $338,000. And that's with maintaining all the programs that we currently have. Understanding that cuts may need to be made, I'm asking, or if reductions to athletics are necessary, the following must be considered. This is, and if you can see that, if not, you can look on your sheet. This is if you were to do partial cuts to JV teams, and this is the savings chart. It would be, you would run a 7th and 8th grade modified, and you'd run a 9th through 12th grade varsity team. So you would cut JV field hockey, JV boys baseball, JV girls softball, JV boys volleyball, JV girls volleyball, JV boys basketball, JV girls basketball, JV boys soccer, JV girls soccer, and a bowling coach. Lacrosse, JV boys and girls would also be eliminated. However, we would start funding the lacrosse modified, so in turn there's no cost savings there. In cutting those teams, you would save roughly $51,615. The positives, you keep 7th and 8th grade athletes active and involved in the program in the school. 9th and 10th grade students may be able to see more growth by playing with older students who can challenge them. This is more competitive than having the 7th and 8th graders join the recreation department. Your varsity rosters would be larger, and we would be cutting less of our student athletes. The negative would be that the 9th grade athletes may see limited amounts of playing time on a 9 through 12 varsity roster, and those borderline athletes that are currently on the rosters, we have the possibility of losing them. If you go-
Krista, could you just, because it's noted on the double asterisk of why you would have to fund a modified team, I know it's later in your presentation.
I would fund the modified team because those other sports that would be affected would still have a modified and a varsity, where if I cut the JV lacrosse and cut the modified lacrosse, we would only be funding one program for lacrosse.
Understood. Okay.
Marissa, can I ask a question?
Yep.
It's been a couple years since I coached, but is 9th grade playing varsity back when I coached a few years ago, they would have to pass a
No.
fitness test?
No.
They don't have to do that anymore?
Just
It's 7th and 8th, which is on my next slide.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted to be sure.
No, that's okay. If you go to the next page, this would be if you did partial cuts to modified teams. You would run a 9th and 10th grade JV and 11th through 12th grade varsity. You would cut the modified girls field hockey, modified boys baseball, modified girls softball, modified boys basketball, modified girls basketball, modified soccer for girls and boys, modified volleyball for girls and boys, and again, one bowling coach. Your savings is roughly $43,000, which let me get back to that. The positives are New York State mandates that if you do not run a modified program, you must run an intramural program for the 7th and 8th graders. That is contractual positions too. So that would probably cost us between $8,000 and $10,000. So your $43,000 savings there, you have to deduct another $8,000, because I'm not sure on the exact price, because it would depend how we ran it, but it's estimated 8 to 10.
And I
So
think you have that down below.
I do.
So if you don't run a modified, you have to run.
If you don't run a modified, which would be this chart, you have to run an
And we
intramural.
currently don't run an intramural.
No, because we have a modified.
Understood.
The positive is the intramurals, we would be able to teach the athletes some of their basic beginner skills. And it says see below, negative for potential costs. Some sports are available at local clubs and recreation departments. 9th and 10th graders, the positive is 9th and 10th graders, instead of being behind an 11th or 12th grader on a varsity team, they would be competitively active in a game. The negative is, like I said, New York State requires that you pass, or I didn't say that, I'm sorry. Lucinda had just brought this up. New York State requires that you pass a selective classification test for any 7th or 8th graders who move up to the JV or the varsity level. Those tests are very hard for some 7th and 8th graders. They're pretty much your physical fitness testing that we do in PE. For those 7th and 8th graders that cannot pass that test, with the lack of modified sports, mean they would not be playing for your school for 2 years. They cannot practice, they cannot step foot in that gym, they cannot be around that JV or varsity team if they don't pass that test. Again, my cost for the modified teams is below. And another negative is just recreation departments are not as competitive as school teams.
Marissa, on the selective classification test, it's not just based on physical fitness, though. It's based on physical maturation.
It is. They have to be approved by their doctor or our school doctor. They ask the personal questions of the girls and the boys to make sure that they are mature enough to be around 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. Physically mature. They will ask them some mental maturity questions, but so you have to get not only your passing of the tests, you have to get the parent's signature, you have to get the doctor's signature. I know there are certain school districts that will not allow it.
I got a question.
Yep.
The last thing, recreation departments are not as competitive as school teams. Is that an opinion, or is there something to base that up?
The basis would be that I've seen this and I've talked to the Boys and Girls Club about things is you, in the rec department, you're only playing against Eden kids. That's it. If you do a travel team or a school team, you are competing against the best of the best in the area.
Well, you also don't have the practice time. They're in a school team
Yep.
practicing every day.
Yep, school teams practice every day, rec departments
Maybe
don't.
once a week.
And in closing, Eden offers a diverse extracurricular program. Athletics like art, music, and technology are extremely important and valued by parents, students, and community members. If athletic offerings were to remain the same, no additions, no cuts, the projected budget will be roughly $328,000. We have heard proposals to add girls modified lacrosse, boys modified lacrosse, and JV cheerleading coach. The cost would be roughly an additional $10,000 to $12,000. And that's it.
Marissa, in other districts that are considering reducing sports, are they, do you find more reducing JV or more reducing modified?
Surprisingly, it is split. If you talk to some of the smaller schools in Cattaraugus County, they have reduced JV and gone to the 7-8-9 model, which is you do a 7-8-9 modified team and a 10-11-12 varsity team. At ECIC, NFL, and the NO, Niagara County, and Niagara County and Niagara Orleans County, there is not as many teams reducing.
Because they're bigger schools.
They are bigger schools. ECIC, when I did approach some of the smaller schools in ECIC about, are you interested in doing a 7-8-9 model? They said only for maybe one sport, no sports. No, we're not doing that. We'll do, Lackawanna does intramurals. Cleve Hill only cut a couple. And other districts are doing it because of numbers. They don't have the numbers. Us in Maryville were the only schools I found in ECIC that were looking at it due to financial.
But what we did see at the Section 6 meeting today was what were there, 15 to 20 schools combining for sports?
Yes. There are many that are combining for sports. That has to do with a mix of low numbers and money.
And we're doing that for football.
We're doing that for football for low numbers. My goal wasn't to bring in revenue, but I know that it helps ours for low number. The thing when you combine with another district, you have to remember we cannot cut an Eden taxpayer to take a North Collins child. Where football, our numbers are so low that we can take them all. We don't have to cut anybody. If we were to merge, say, for basketball, we would not be able to because they have a team, I have a team. I would have to cut some Eden kids to take some North Collins kids, and we are not
you
allowed
can't
to do
do.
that.
Is there requirements on, you can only have so many kids on a team?
For some
Yes,
sports.
varsity, there's state rosters of how many you can take at a certain level. How many you can take to states. You can only, like basketball is only 15, baseball's 21. JV and modified, they allow you to have as many. It comes down to what the coach can handle and do you have enough uniforms for that, which I'm dealing with right now at the modified level. Yes.
Last meeting on Saturday, there were comment made about income, not just the expense end of it, such as charging for entrance to athletics, different things. Has that been considered, or is that a possibility?
It's been considered and talked about. Right now, it's a contractual we have to work on. We do it for football. and it comes in, and that money ends up, the Boosters does it right now, and that goes towards our uniforms for different
Booster
sports.
Club collects on that, and then they...
The Booster Club collects on it, and then they in turn put it back towards the teams that run it and have parents work it, so it goes back to the teams to get their uniforms, because I do not purchase uniforms. We do not charge right now at any of the inside events. We have been in talks with it, but when we do that, I also have to have a paid person through the district to collect at the gate, so.
So it's a break even at best.
Kind of, that's why they got away from it, but we're still working on it because we have ideas on it, but I've not included it in our budget just yet.
The paid person, why, is that a state mandate or something, or
No,
is it just?
it's in our
contractual?
it's in our contract.
So let me take it from here. So there are positions for extracurriculars that are embedded into the ETA or the Eden Teachers Association contract. It makes sense, because then you can ensure that you have people who are approved by the board, people who are certificated, people who will be there. So your scorekeepers, your timekeepers, your ticket takers, your coaches, your assistant coaches, your advisors for extracurriculars are all paid positions by the district. So those are part of a contract and negotiated in and negotiated out.
For this budget, obviously, can't change, but I would think things like a ticket taker doesn't seem, I could see the coaches, et cetera, and the other ones being school personnel, but something like a ticket taker seems like maybe that could be negotiated out next time. I mean, it'd be something worth,
We've had conversations.
okay.
I think it's a good idea.
I got a question on that, a follow-up. I know what sports I go to. Is there enough people going to watch the sports to make it viable to collect? You understand? Because
I do
and then how many
understand,
people
yes.
are not going to go
And-
because you charge them $1?
Yes, I do understand, and I guess before I came in, I would say probably 8 to 10 years ago, they were doing it and they found that they weren't making money, they were actually losing money, so it was a position that was not funded anymore, so they stopped collecting. Now, more districts are doing it because they need the money, so I think you do have enough people, and it is almost, they're used to it by now.
Well,
They
it
go to
probably
all
depends
the,
on, it probably depends on the sport.
it depends on the sport.
Probably don't, not every sport has enough people that are coming to watch the sports.
And that's why you wouldn't do it an outside event. Somebody brought it up the other day of, what are you gonna do, chase a soccer parent?
You don't
across
have a
the field?
fence.
But an indoor event, we do have a number of people at swim meets, at cheerleading competition, at basketball games and wrestling, and those would be the events that we would look at. So it's definitely something that's being talked to. We are working with the ATA, and Colleen's been great. And we'll keep working on it to make sure it is something that we think we could bring in money to the district for.
I have a question, because this is actually the third time we've heard from athletics. And I guess I'm just like, what is this? Is this because we're making cuts to athletics and we're trying to figure out the best way to do that? Or,
Potentially.
I guess I just don't get why athletics has been up 3 times and nobody else has been up.
Well, athletics in the first
You know, good
presentation.
I mean, I guess, I just want to be fair to
Yep.
everybody. I mean, I guess transportation's talking again
Okay.
tonight, right?
They are.
But like Lucinda hasn't got a chance to talk twice, and
But-
computers are critical.
In
You know
all,
what I mean?
in all
Like,
fairness,
Yeah.
with our first budget advisory team meeting, the fiscal presentation was only transportation. And because it's very early in the process, we started in October with the presentations, which is generally earlier than what you would start. So to round it out, she gave background information. Even if she didn't go that night, it really was to round out the presentation. It wasn't because she was required to do a fiscal presentation that night. That's why you've heard from her 3 times. So the first one had nothing to do with her fiscal for next year. So you saw her do one budget presentation, and now most of the other departments have cut in some ways. Hers is a little bit more, athletics is a little bit more complex.
Okay.
So in doing that, there are a lot of moving pieces. So in all fairness, the board and the budget advisory team kind of needs to see all those moving pieces. It's not as cut and dry as maybe some other instructional departments.
Well, I would suggest, too, that we fully anticipated a 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 modified varsity, right? Am I right on that? Would fly. And found out midway through all this that not enough school districts are going for it. So in trying to regroup again is bringing it back with more specific numbers than Marissa even had 2 weeks ago.
Because without doing this right now, all the other departments, we have worked ways of savings into it. Without doing another presentation here and taking a look to say, okay, those didn't work, what can we do now? We can't
Yeah, babies.
look at the savings without coming back and taking a look at how to do it. All the other departments, including Lucinda's, we've talked about that, found ways to make painful cuts, but ways of being able to do that, which wouldn't require multiple presentations, so.
Okay, I just have to interrupt because Mike Burns just had babies in the barn, so can you just talk about that for a minute?
Congratulations.
I really don't want to present this.
Well, the horses aren't due till May, but we had 2 goats just born. Well, I was not expecting it. so I went there to- Yeah, I knew she was pregnant.
2 goats. All right.
There's the horse.
Sorry for the interruption.
We'll take that out of the bad minutes.
Edit.
So does it answer your question? Okay. Dick?
What does the athletic program cost for the football?
328,000.
That's not football, that's total.
No, if you look at
Just
your,
football.
this sheet right here,
Yes.
this one right here has the breakdown. So if you go to the
Okay.
second page is, first page is actually varsity. If you take in both the coaches, officials, supplies, transportation, it's 21,000. And supplies, yeah, 21,000.
I have last year's numbers, and it looks like
Just varsity, or is that?
405,000 last year, so the athletics has taken a cut already. Last year.
Yeah, last year was probably the most serious hit that athletics has taken.
You know, Marissa, I want to tell you something. When we were dealing with this with the music department also, we found the same thing, that even though the numbers were declining, the kids were still there. The numbers were still there, and good numbers were still there, so that's a good thing.
Any other questions before we get to transportation?
Yeah, I might be wrong here, but we had talked about bus drivers doing a flat rate.
That's something that still has to be worked out. Tom, myself, Rose, Union has to sit down and negotiate and
contractual.
everything. So that's more of a, I guess it would be something probably for savings for next year.
I got one more question. I see you came up with 2 possible ways of savings by eliminating modified or eliminating JV, something like that. Did you look at possibly cutting individual sports?
Well,
And I don't know how you would do it because you're going to kill somebody.
And I gave you nine teams that I would personally recommend that were the chunk of the savings.
But if the question is, and I'm going to take that because it's one that I don't want Marissa to get caught in the middle of.
Right, I'm not-
If the-
I know what
no,
you said, not-
if the question is modified JV varsity sport,
No. Okay, and I'm not trying to put her in the...
I know that, I know that, I know that.
Avoid, okay.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If we're talking about modified JV varsity,
We're going to eliminate, maybe it's the board's job, we're going to eliminate girls' basketball, we're going to eliminate boys'
Golf.
soccer.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Now, does the board look at doing that, or do we look at the 2, or do they look at the 2 alternatives that are out there?
this is what will happen from here, is all the numbers for every sport are up here.
Right.
So the board and Tom and I will look at these, have conversations with this, but ultimately the board adopts a budget. And if in fact the direction of this school district is to eliminate a sport,
Right.
then that will come from the board.
Okay.
Can I also make a comment on that? This here, like, for instance, with JV, and correct me if I'm wrong, Marissa, this is individual cuts as well. There are still some JV sports which get rolled into varsity and it's still around. So this is looking at individual teams and seeing the best way to structure it, which still allow the kids to be able to play to maximum.
Sure.
So it is doing exactly what you're asking, have individual sports been identified as potential.
But it wouldn't be individual sports dropped all the way up.
No.
Right, so there's 3 proposals. One, help me, Marissa, I'll say the first one, to eliminate an individual sport. The second one would be to drop modified, in which case we'd have to add intramurals. And if we dropped modified, then we would have a 7, 8, 9 JV, and a 10, 11, 12 varsity.
If you dropped some modified teams?
Yes.
Some modified.
Some, no, you'd have the 9-10 JV and the 11-12.
That's it, thank you. 9, 10, okay, because the 7, 8 would play intramurals. And the one I left out,
Keeping everything?
keeping everything,
Well,
Cutting JV.
Some.
Cutting some
Right,
JV,
no, I hear
running
you.
a 7-8,
right,
and then a 9 through 12 varsity,
thank you.
and
right.
keeping everything is the other one.
Okay,
Was
okay.
Don, were you coming from, why didn't we cut all the bowling or the golf?
That's
for some of
exactly
the
what he's
little
asking.
teams?
That was the question.
Well, I'm not sure how little the bowling team is, but when you look at some of those numbers on modified, I mean, all I know is, we were told if you have 10 or fewer kids in one of our electives, it gets cut. And we've got girls basketball modified running with 10 kids, and I'm not saying that anything should be cut, I'm just saying, you know, if we're looking apples to apples here,
And
there are some small modified teams there.
There are, but I'll make a comment, is we cut people from some of those teams. We don't want large teams, because when you get large teams, it turns into, my kid's not playing enough, we want, and they're not, I don't have uniforms to fit them, so, like, I've told, my softball coach just cut 10 kids
Yeah.
to get to 15 because
I'm
I
modified.
don't have uniforms for them, I don't have quality minutes I can give them, so I want a program that's a legit program where they are getting qualified minutes, they have uniforms, so we do want not large teams. If we kept everybody, I'd have 20 kids on each team.
Does intramural team allow for more kids at that level?
Yes,
I mean-
but it's basically you scrimmage every.
Right.
if you
Yeah,
want.
but so what? It's like
Right.
backyard fun. I like the intramural.
But it's
We
still
also
teaching
have to-
skills.
And not only that, but Laura, I like the way you hit on that. I didn't look at that, but you're right, the numbers are low. In the classroom, we want lower numbers too.
Which I'm not saying that should be lower either.
I can jack those numbers up. I just told my
Yeah.
modified lacrosse coach he had 31 try out that I didn't want him to keep
You
31.
want to know what? You know what? That brings up a subject that there's 15 of those kids that aren't in athletics.
This is not a rec program though. This is a school sport.
Here's
Look.
one thing, and again, in all fairness to transportation, because we're going to come back to this later in the board meeting, so under my section, at least for me to be able to move forward for March 8th, to have more.
Just one thing.
Yeah.
The relevant number, if you're looking at a roster of 10 on basketball, that's not the relevant number. If you're gauging interest, you want to know how many kids tried out. How many kids tried out for that girls modified team?
Girls modified, I think it was 14.
Okay, so the interest was there, but they had to let some of them go because there's only 5 kids that can play at a time on a basketball court. You don't want a team of more than 10 or 11 or 12.
I understand that, but it's relative to, I think what about those other 5 kids that wanted to have physical activity and participate? They don't get to.
Well, they can go play another sport.
No.
That's where I'm coming from. There's 5 kids that,
That doesn't make, I see what you're saying,
there's
Barb.
5 kids that wanted to play. Now, no, you're benched. You don't even get to go and have fun.
Well, what's the point of keeping 15 if 5 aren't going to play anyway?
And she said it was a uniform issue too
I
for some
don't
of.
have, we keep as many uniforms as we
Do you
have.
put a quality team out there, you just have an intramural sport?
Well, that's just it. That maybe that would be a good.
You're
Our
talking about
rule-
expanding
My rules at
athletics.
Modified are that everybody needs to get quality minutes. And if you have a team, say for basketball, where 5 people can be on a court, if you have a team of 15, how many quality minutes are you getting? And I can tell you that the parent is not happy. They will be happy the first week you talk to them that their kid made the team. But if I don't have enough uniforms for their kid and they have to circulate uniforms to wear on a day to school, they get very mad. If their child didn't see equal playing time at the modified level, they get mad. And we are also trying to teach them the basics of sports so they can move up through the years. I could keep numbers. I just went through with my coaches for modified trying to tell them 31 kids are coming out for girls modified lacrosse, and I said, please do not keep that many. We don't have the uniforms. I can't provide quality minutes. And I understand that. And you're talking about those poor kids that don't make the team, which cutting a child is the hardest thing to do. If you do either of these 2 models,
You're cutting kids.
you're cutting a huge amount of kids.
Okay.
So
Mike,
I'm confused.
and I know there's a lot going on here. Mike, if I might ask, because we still have transportation, we are going to be coming back in the board meeting for the board to take a look and give us direction of where to move forward. So we can come back to this topic. I do want to also give Rose a chance for her presentation because this will generate more conversation, I'll absolutely guarantee.
I have one question then.
Yes.
This number here, this $337,000.
Go to the last
Yes.
slide.
That does not include
It
That
does.
does not, I'm sorry.
modified lacrosse or.
No, if you
maybe
wanted to
cheerleading?
add those 3 sports, it would be roughly 10 to 12,000 more. And I put that in there because I was asked what the cost would be. So if we offered everything the same as we are right now, it's 328,000 roughly. If we added those 3 positions back in, it would be around 10 to 12 additional.
So at this point, we're looking at cutting some of the 328. If we add those 3, it's 338, and then we'd be looking at cutting from there.
Okay.
All right, are we okay for Rose to come up for hers? And again, we will be coming back to this conversation at the board meeting. As I said, hopefully by the end of tonight, we'll have some direction of that we're going to move. Okay.
Yes. And they
Marissa, can you leave your laptop for Rose?
Can I leave it? Yes.
That'd be wonderful, thank you.
Oh, okay.
They run a 9th grade team as well.
Somebody else. You don't need to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, it would be, believe me.
David, you look a little different. You look a little different. Very nice.
David's here.
Trying to do this for 2 weeks.
I hear you.
There's not enough. It's
Probably
just
everybody has
everybody needs one.
And again, just a reminder for the entire BAC committee, everyone was emailed a presentation yesterday. There was one section in there that said to be updated. She has updated it. It is only on one page. We re-emailed everyone. She's going to show the slide here. She printed 5 additional if anyone needs it, but everyone has it emailed to them as well. We did not expect that you guys would print it out in time for the meeting, but she will talk about that. Just continue without scanning.
Yeah, just close it. And if you have a virus now, she has
Open,
it.
Well, we've got Lucinda here, right? Yeah, but there's a virus.
Nice try.
Oh, isn't that cute?
That mean you have a
I
seat?
knew everybody was doing double duty around
I
here.
did not
We're
plan
trying to
that.
save money.
Yeah.
Is that what you do on your lunch hour? That's it.
I just have to be
She's
on
not a
guard
real
of
driver,
for
she's smiling.
Up on,
now.
I go up on Clarksburg just for fun.
The Fish Philosophy book by Stephen Dundon talks about having the right people in the right seats on the bus to really move the district forward, and I think we have that with Sandy.
Rose, can you just move the microphone a little closer for you?
Okay, did anybody need another copy, or you're all set?
This didn't show, my then and now didn't show print.
It didn't print on mine either, I don't know why. On my computer. Page 2 didn't print.
Okay.
Transportation then and now.
Well, you've got 5 of them right there, right?
I've got the other one.
Yeah.
So we'll pass them around.
Here's the one and half
You
miles.
guys can share.
Here's system,
I just want to look at what.
Do you need another one, or are you all
Pass
set?
it on.
here's 62.
Need another one, Barb?
I just want to look at what then and now is. All I have to do is, oh, it's numbers, great.
Okay, transportation then and now. The regular home-to-school routes for 12-13, we're looking at 20 of the regular.
Well, let me even back up for a second here.
Okay.
What she's done here on this slide is she's taken all of our different type of routes that we have, whether they're in district, out of district, special ed, whatever, and looked at them from last year to this year and projected for next year. So what you're seeing is all the different types of route on the left side. And then, as I said, then and now. Go ahead.
Do you want me to run through each column?
It's your presentation, however.
Okay. No? Okay.
Could you just explain what's McKinney-Vento routes?
McKinney-Vento is a, if a student is displaced, we are
Homeless.
legally responsible for transportation back to the home school.
And homeless by the legal definition, the federal legal definition, homeless does not mean that you are out on the street. Homeless means you don't have a permanent place that you actually call home. So you could be doubled up at someone else's home, you're still considered homeless under McKinney-Vento.
Or at grandma's or an aunt's or something.
So would they go back to their home district, or would they come to Eden?
They have the option.
They have the option of where they want to be. And if they choose here, we have no choice but to educate them. We do get refunded for it, but we have no choice but to accept that cost.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Do you want me to run through anything?
Well, what you might want to show is your differences from last year, this year, next year. The ones that are the same, maybe not, but what's going to be different from last year, now, next.
Okay.
It's only a couple lines.
Last year, we were at, the home to school, we were at 20. We're down to 19 and a half with the diminishing of Route 7 to a 2-hour in the afternoon. And next year, the regular home to school, we look pretty normal as we are to, right now. The difference, though, will be in special ed. If Sean doesn't have any surprises for me coming up next year, with the graduation of a couple of students,
Sean, please don't get
and
ready.
the moving. Oh, thank you.
And we can't really control some of the special ed numbers, so it's not just Sean saying, I've got another one for you.
Yeah.
It's what's here.
And the movement of a couple of students to a different placement, I'm able to remove a couple of the special ed runs for next year. So that's 2 drivers and 1 attendant. So for the 14-15, that will result in the 27 and a half number of routes. Now, the number of routes without layering, you'll see, is very
Can you explain
is
layering?
much higher. Yeah, layering is something that I do to keep the number of vehicles and drivers down. For instance, let me use private and parochial. St. Francis, Immaculata, St. Mary's of the Lake. They come in on our high school run, no matter how old they are, and we transfer them over to Route 17 at the high school. And then she goes out to the lake and she drops off at those 3 sites. That way, I'm only using 1 driver, 1 vehicle, and she doesn't do an elementary, she's covering that parochial. So she has a high school and a private parochial run. And on the way back, we happen to have a McKinney-Vento stop in Hamburg, so I've even layered on top of that, so that helps alleviate the pressure of trying to find more transportation for that. So layering is taking what already is existing for the school and putting more onto it. Any more questions of that?
Can you explain on the increase in fuels and materials, how you came up with that?
Well, we decreased all of our lines by 10%. And as you see, our fuel is going up. And so with it, taking my budget line where I was this year, taking it back to last year's, which was, I'm decreasing it 10%, that does not allow for any increase, for the possibility of an increase in the fuel.
Rose, what percentage increase do you think that is?
A percentage?
That's what I was wondering. How did you drive it?
It's about 10%.
Yeah.
Increase in the fuel. I mean,
Not even 10%, I don't think.
it's a little less.
Yeah, maybe about 9%. It's not that we're going to use it, but I know if it does increase, I'm going to have that in the forecast, because not only does it affect our fuels, but our oils, our tires, everything is reflecting on that crude oil price.
And the other
Out in
thing
the shop.
too, I think for people to realize with that 25,000, she's being conservative. She did not want to come forward and say, I'm going to give you $150,000 savings and say, oh, fuel went up. She'd rather underestimate the savings and then find out she didn't use that much in fuel and give us more, rather than saying, we don't think we're going to give you more and then come back with less.
Yeah. And if I don't
We'd be
use,
counting on that savings that she's given us. So that bottom line number that she's given us at 82,000
Was savings.
is savings. So we're counting on 82,000 savings. So if she didn't take that 25,000 off, we would have been counting in, a little bit over like 105,000. And when she didn't come in at 105,000, we would have been short I'd rather her be a little bit more conservative.
Rose,
Mm-hmm.
could you just explain the midday VOTEC routes, why they're going
three?
down next year from 3 to 2?
I have a wheelchair student that graduates.
Okay.
Okay,
That's
so
why
I
there's
don't
three.
need, yeah, because right now I'm running a wheelchair
Got it.
van.
I didn't know if we were dropping something or whatever.
No, it's just, again, it's a special need that we have to facilitate last year and this year. Okay?
And so this $82,000 savings is not with changing mileage, not changing route pickups. This is just based on reducing routes for reasons of layering and whatever, less students that we need elsewhere. So
Correct.
That's a
And-
pretty solid number.
And we're not asking to inconvenience any parents either. This is status quo to what they're used to. Okay, this isn't moving. How come I'm,
Arrow.
You have to use the arrow.
okay, thank you. The question was about transportation within the 1.5 mile
Got a
area.
pointer with her.
Yeah, who's gonna say?
Can I do it from here?
Yeah.
Okay, we talked about the non-decimal pupil, and that would be the 1.5 mile radius.
The non-decimal pupil, again, are those students that we transport under that 1.5 mile range that we don't get state aid for.
Rose, can you show a school view?
Rose, I know you've been really conservative about everything, and like you had mentioned that when one bus that's coming in from picking up kids from far away picks up a lot of these kids, is that true?
Yes, I can show you that in just a moment. Okay? Okay, right here is Eden Elementary, here's the GLP, and here's the high school. This is the Weller Division. This is Hillbrook. And then we have East Pleasant, Roswell, and Maple. Right now, what Barb is just talking about on the elementary, Maple and Roswell are picked up on Route 12 on her way in. Route 7, because there's so many students, Route 7 is coming in from over in here and picking up East Pleasant. And Route 21 this year, because there are so many students on Hillbrook, last year I had Route 7 accommodating both of those. There's not enough space. So Route 21's over here in the Boston Hills. She's coming in, she's picking up there and going right over into the elementary. And also, all of those runs are outside this radius, so we are getting state aid on that bus and driver, the fuel and the driver.
Now, let's not spend a lot of time on the 1.5 mile radius.
Okay.
Let's go right to the one which is more realistic.
Okay.
This is a
How did
little
you
bit
get
more
this?
realistic of a scenario here. Or not.
Where did it go? There we go. Okay, we gotta get this moved up.
See if you can put the view
Okay,
maybe like 85.
Vanna's working on the slide for me. This is a mile. We need to go back to the mile.
Yeah, I will.
Got to get to slide 4.
There we go.
And keep, yeah, there you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Now, the mile radius, again, here is the elementary, the GLP, and here's the high school. We had talked about possibly doing group stops. That would be Hillbrook coming down to the corner, East Pleasant, Roswell, and Maple. These side roads here already come down to 62. These would come down to 62 also. So the bus would do a clean sweep. We can do that on the high school only, or we could do the pre-K through 12, whichever the board would decide to do.
And can you tell us why we can't do elementary high school? Why would it have to be either all 3 or just the 1?
Well, if you want to split a GLP student apart from an elementary student, when you're talking about the younger students, it's usually one family. How many families do we have that has students pre-K through 2nd, and they also have a 3rd, 4th, or 5th, 6th grader? So you're going to ask the sibling to walk to the corner, but the other one, the bus is going to
So
come
you
right
can't
by them
separate
and pick them up?
Or they'll be right next door neighbors.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
So we're going to drive a bus right by a group of students that had to walk, so.
But the reason we want to bring this up is that's part of her moving forward, of her options of either all 3 schools or just the one, because she
Yeah.
can't split.
Yeah,
the two
one
of you.
run or both runs,
Yeah.
you know, vice versa. Okay. In the next slide, you'll see the savings and mileage. This is the Weller Division. Right now, on the high school, even though all of those students have a seat on a bus, on the high school run in the morning, we had none of them ride, which makes sense. They just go across to the high school, right? But we do pick up students here and here and here on the high school run to go to the high school.
So your proposal is no Weller,
No Weller pickup,
yeah, what else?
no school view, and all of these students would come down to 62.
So you still pick
How
up.
far of a walk is it from the top of Hillbrook to 62?
Well, this is a mile here.
So
So
you
that would
have
be,
a mile?
Half mile.
About a half mile.
Question. You're talking about mileage is how you compute your cost. Is the time of any importance to you, or is that really
well,
a significant
not a
problem?
whole lot, because remember, these buses that are going to come in for the sweep are already out here in the far reaches.
Well, what I'm getting to,
So-
if you stop on Hillview, or
Hillbrook?
Hillbrook, and pick up every student at a different stop, it takes a lot of time. Every
Yeah.
stop is a lot of
Yes.
time. If
I
you
agree.
picked up 3 stops on Hillbrook,
Make them walk to specific locations.
Partial, because again,
Yeah.
if they're going,
Then
if
they
they're already going from junior, senior to
no, I'm
elementary
saying
and then
just
GLC.
on Hillbrook itself.
Yeah, you're
three,
right.
like, say, 3 stops.
Yep.
Mutual stops, corner stops, whatever.
Right.
That's still going to give you the same mileage, but it's going to be a lot shorter time period to do all that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And that's why
Right.
I'm asking, which is more important, the time or the mileage? Or
Well,
is,
But we're
But
still
the
paying the
time is
driver.
not going to be significant, because there's 3 different buses facilitating this area. And that bus is going to stop, they're still going to have to sit there and wait for all those students to load, and then they're going to proceed on. Remember, like, Route 21 is coming in from the Boston Hills, so she's got to have enough time to go there. Sure, it's going to give them maybe 5 minutes, 7 minutes difference, but it's in quarter hours for their pay. Okay, so it's something that once it becomes alive, we definitely will look at it. It can be changed at any time. But time-wise, right now, I could not forecast
But
what the
perhaps in-
savings would be for time.
Perhaps
But I
in
can the
fuel.
mileage.
In fuel and in mileage.
Correct.
Okay, and wear
Yeah.
and tear on the bus.
Correct.
Okay.
That I can talk about, but
One of
as
the
for the
most
actual
frust-
time,
one of the most frustrating things to do is see a bus stop every
Yep.
30 feet to pick up a student.
Every
When their
hour.
driveways actually join each other.
Right.
And you see that all the time. I think that's frustrating and quite frankly, kind of stupid.
Yeah.
So, if there's some way you could
Is there,
voluntarily encourage parents to create common stops, the buses might begin to stop 20% fewer times, and that would increase the efficiency, because you're not, idling is very expensive for a bus, I mean, we know that, and the stop and go is
Right.
expensive. It would
And the
pick up
fumes,
time and
just
save
sitting on the
fuel, and
bus,
eventually
the fumes.
shorten these runs somewhat, and any one of them might not, but you might be able to shorten every run from 15 minutes. Plus, I think it sends a sign to this population that we're not being foolish about the dollars.
One of the things that we look for on that is there a sidewalk on that road that they're walking
Yeah.
on?
Be very
Is there a railroad track that pass, a bridge they have to go over? Because while on these, we are saying that they're not secondary roads, they're more residential roads, and we feel safe about that. On Jennings or on some of the other roads, we would not be able to allow them to create bus stops, because they would be walking in what's considered a non-safe zone.
Understood, but
Yeah.
the circle is a mile and a half. You look at the
No,
other
this one's a
bottom left
mile.
quadrant, and there's still a huge population that could be consolidated for stopping.
I agree.
It would seem like.
That's why this is here,
And the message
absolutely.
is loud and clear to the population.
right, and that's what we're looking at. However, in this kind of scenario, we would still run 3 different buses because of the student population. But the bus would be stopped longer on Route 62 which we would be holding up traffic a little bit longer.
All right, why don't you go to the next slide and let her just finish the savings, because we're getting at 22, and so I want to make sure we
Okay,
get through this.
It's space bar as well, right there. Okay, thanks. I need that larger one. Okay, this is the scenario that we were just looking at, the mapping.
Can we go
Yeah, the other way.
75% for the old folks?
I'm not left-handed, I'm doing it left-handed. Would you hold on?
Vanna's doing
Now, I
a
think
great
Vanna could do this.
Okay, here would be the GLP elementary and high school, and we're looking at, it would drop down to about 18 routes then,
Now,
because,
she was at 19.5.
If you
So-
did what, Rose?
Get rid
It-
of Weller?
if I get rid of Weller and consolidate some of those bus stops, because we know many of those students are going to walk them.
Okay, I
And
just
this is
needed
for
to frame what it
all
was.
3 schools. All 3 schools.
These are all 3 schools.
All
three,
3 schools.
on the left
So
side.
it's both runs.
And that was walking to 62.
Walking to 62, absolutely no transportation at Weller, no transportation on Schoolview,
Okay.
because they would cross
Yeah.
over to a sidewalk and walk. They're that close.
They walk
So
in.
the first column is all 3 buildings.
All 3 buildings. This one, as we just discussed, we can't break between the GLP and the elementary. It's all for nothing for the little ones. Okay?
What would corner stops south of Church also affect? Would that
South
have an
of the
effect?
church.
South of Church?
Second.
You'd be going into the 1.5-mile radius. She only looked at the mile radius, but
But still,
what
They'd
if-
still be getting
why
picked
not?
up, though.
Why not?
Right?
Yeah.
He's just saying having them walk
Only
to
corner
the end.
stops there, yeah.
And when we, actually in some of our routes, when we get into Second and First and Elizabeth, they do come down to corner stops already.
Because they volunteered to, or because they were asked to?
There's not that many, and they're not far off of the corner, so it's more efficient to have them come that little ways to the
But do you
corner.
ask them to, or do they just common sense that they just?
We just have been doing it, and they just accommodate us with no complaining.
It sounds
Where
like
the
it
bus
sounds-
stops, I
it
better
sounds
walk
like we-
over there.
But it would
See, we
take,
teach
they're
them,
so
yeah.
close to the corners, it takes so long to go around those little blocks.
Yeah.
that it would be wasteful.
Rose, another question.
Could you go back, the circle, is it right? But anyway, the bottom line is, yes, Weller's going to walk because I have a pathway designed to go through somebody's yard. You start doing that in Hillbrook, and kids are still going to go directly to the school. They're not going to go out to Main Street
Right.
and wait.
And-
So now you're going to have a public relations problem because they're
Yeah,
going to go
They
through the
already
yards.
do.
They already do that.
They already do that.
Yep.
Well, then you're going to be officially sanctioning it, and then you've
Yeah,
got to.
I think safety-
No, and as we get into more slides, the state does cover some of that conversation for us.
Because it's legal doesn't mean it makes sense
The
necessarily.
parents become responsible to getting them to the stop then.
It'll come back here to this board.
Well,
You're gonna
and
run
it
out of
could be- Okay, sorry.
You done with this?
Okay, and then this one is just the high school. And if we left the smaller, younger students as is and just did the high school, that would be the difference there. Okay?
So bottom line, the savings of what you're looking at is where she was proposing $82,000 savings just from consolidation. That 82 would either just go to about 83 if you did just the high school, just in gas savings really, or 126 if you did them all. So really, you're kind of looking at 82 or the 126 is kind of one or the other. And Dick, I think your point is well taken. The board, when they're looking at this at the board meeting, need to take into account the PR side of it and all of that and say which is going to be the better route to go.
And I know, working with everyone here, we all will take it very much to heart and look in-depthly into the inconvenience to our parents and our students and their safety. Walkers, these are the New York State Department of Education guidelines that we go by. Non-city school districts, which Eden is, we are required by law to provide transportation for all eligible resident pupils, grade 6 through 8, who live more than 2 miles from the school, and 912 live more than 3 miles. We are obligated by law to transport. However, at this time, we are transporting students that live right across the school that they attend. Okay? So we are very generous. However, just about all the school districts with voter approval have adopted eligibility distances of less than the mandated 2 and 3 miles, okay? The 1.5 miles, though, is something, again, that I have to be very, very conscious of, because if I have a bus that picks up only within that 1.5 miles, we're losing money. Okay, so I have to be very conscious
Is there a
about that.
percentage of students on the bus that have to be outside that 1.5 miles, or can it
Nope.
be just one?
One kid.
So what we do is we take a look to see how many kids are on the bus. The number that are under the 1.5 miles, those come right off the top for aid. The ones on the bus, we get aid for that are over.
And then we go
1.5
pick up that one.
Yeah?
An example, I have Route 14, who's out in the Boston Ridge on her high school run. She comes in, she sits at the high school, loads for the Carrier Center, takes them over. I have her stopping at the Taj Mahal out on Route 20 and brings that group of students into the district, not that that needed to be part of her route, but then she's picking up at Eden KinderCare and Main Street downtown. Now, without that stop out on Route 20, we'd be losing money on that elementary run because all those students are within that 1.5 miles. So we had to design it to make sure that we
What's
didn't
the
lose
Taj
out on
Mahal?
some state money.
Yeah, we don't know what the Taj Mahal is.
Oh, it's a group of buildings. How would you explain it, John?
They used to be.
They're subsidized apartments.
Yeah,
They used to be,
So lots of kids come from there.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I think
Okay.
everyone-
Just one other comment, especially for the board, that if you restrict, like, again, Hillbrook, because it's not, kids aren't going to walk as easily, you're now passing the cost of the transportation on the parent, because they're going to be busing their little kids, they're busing it by car to the school, and you're going to have a traffic problem in the school every morning.
Most of them already do. Most of them already drive.
Okay, so
there.
it may not be a problem for that reason, but it's got to be considered, because the little kid isn't going to walk from that distance, and they're going to come in by car.
Well, I'd listen to Brenda because she sees it.
right.
Most of them
Well,
already.
But you know, the whole...
But that's why we're here, to have
that's-
everyone bring up their
I'm
ideas.
I'm really impressed Dick, that you see it that way, because that's what makes this so complicated. Every single positive has all of this attached to it. So thank you for even bringing it up, because that's the point of having an advisory team.
Yep.
I'm all for letting them walk.
You know what, because there's no sidewalks and because of that distance, I would actually say that the little ones should be picked up, maybe at group stops, but at least picked up, whereas the older kids can certainly walk to the corner. you know, I mean,
There are sidewalks.
There are sidewalks.
There are, but still, even, well, I don't know, I mean, I'm in Hamburg where everybody walks in the village, so K through 12, so it's,
Really?
you know, oh yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Has Eden always had bus service for everybody? I just, when I was a kid, we all walked. And I walked over a mile to high school, but not to...
I can see districts as a whole, and I'm not going to talk about Eden, but districts as a whole have moved to group stops to door-to-door stops. That has been the trend over the past several years. Now it seems to be reversing, where kids are being asked to walk a little bit more because we can't afford to do it.
But I would say if you go back to the time that Don and I were in school, there were more walkers than there are now.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, I walked as well. There
When we were in
absolutely.
school, Colin, a couple years.
And we walk uphill both ways.
Both barefoot with the, yes, of course.
There were a couple of years that they had contingency budgets when we were in school, that it was the 1.5 miles had to be transported, and
Yeah.
we made it work. I mean, you know, parents back then just carpooled and stuff, and that was 1.5 miles, because that included us, and way up onto,
Where you live, it makes sense that a bus comes there.
right. Oh, yeah.
Your
Oh,
chances
yeah.
are, he's out of, I live on Hillbrook. When I moved in, and I couldn't believe my kids got picked up by a bus. I thought I was in fantasy land.
Eden.
They pick them up right across from the GLP, take them to the...
But
Yeah,
what you're
elementary
describing, and I want Rose to be able to go on because we do need to set up for the
Okay.
board meeting, but what you are describing is a general difference from the 1960s and 70s in education till the 2014s. We are much more accommodating as a school district than we were 50 years ago. It's just what's happened. It's not Eden, it's across. It's across.
It is. And I think that, again, now fiscal pressures are pushing us back to where we came. quite honestly. Rose, most of your other presentations, just background, I think most everyone here has it.
Okay.
So unless, are there additional questions regarding transportation specifically, or suggestions?
How about we were discussing the buses. Did you look into that at all as far as leasing
Do you
buses?
wanna
Yep,
do that
we're going to talk about that right at the board
next
meeting. Absolutely. Yep. Other questions?
Any other questions?
And again, these were two very heavy topics, a lot of different moving parts in both of these. Hopefully, as we get towards the end of the board meeting, we have more discussion, can come to some resolution, so we have an idea of what potential savings would be for those, so we can then help formalize the budget we'd be putting together for the 8th, so if that makes sense.
Just wanted to thank Rose and Marissa. I know that was an awful lot of work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.